Hey there, Groovesters and Groove Stars. Ridgely here with another Groove Growth program. Really excited about this one. A dear, dear friend and a heck of an individual. This is the CEO and founder of the Palm Beach Video Academy and FBG Creative, award-winning filmmaker, and the producer of the Banky Awards, which is the banking industry's equivalent of the Oscars or the Emmys. My very, very good friend and video mentor, Federico Giller. Federico, Fede, so great to be with you today, man. How are you?
Ridgely, what a pleasure to be here with you today. It's absolutely awesome. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation and to, contributing to the Groove Group. And so actually, I don't know if you remember this, but going way back when, going into the history a little bit, I got started in the video world. One of the programs was actually Mike Filsame's and
Thank you.
and Andy's program, Video Genesis. So there's a beautiful loop, going on here that I want to address. So this is really, really cool to be here. It means a lot to me, actually.
Well, thanks so much, man. I'm grateful, but I want to go back a little bit because very few people know the real story behind what happened with you and your family. Very difficult for most people in the Western world to even comprehend. So I want to just go back. I mean, there was a time when your family was among the most prominent families in the country of Venezuela. You grew up in your youth in a very, very elite society. And to give everybody some color on how elite it really was, Federico was the two-time national dressage champion of the country of Venezuela. Now, what is dressage? It's an Olympian sport. It's where you see the horses dancing. So Federico was the two-time national horse dancing champion of the country of Venezuela. Obviously, that's a sport reserved only for the wealthiest, most elite people, because most people don't have dancing horses. But Fede, I mean, take us back, man. You came from that background, and then all of a sudden in comes a dictator, and the whole thing just collapsed. Tell us a little bit about that, because that is really fascinating.
Totally. And it's sort of the, having grown up in this golden nest. I mean, it was just absolutely incredible. Everything was provided for, nothing was missing. It was, just to give you an idea, and I don't normally do this because I don't like to brag or anything, but I just want to give Groovesters an idea. Caracas is a very beautiful valley surrounded by two mountainsides, one in the north, which is the national park, and then you go through that and then you arrive in the Caribbean. Then you have the Valley of Caracas. And then my family owned the whole other mountainside overlooking Caracas, okay? And when this thing happened, I mean, all of those lands, terrains, I mean, super prime real estate in the nicest neighborhoods in Caracas was just gone overnight. Mm-hmm. And it was rough. It was very, 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 very tough. And I mean, let's just get very real, Rich. I mean, part of that contributed to, in terms of the pain felt in the family and the sense of loss and the sense of despair, really, resulted in my mom eventually, moving into the forest in remote Venezuela in the headwaters of the Orinoco. She said, I'm done with all this. And then she got into a sense of contributing and helping Native American communities, way out there. But really, this took such a heavy toll that she was taking from us prematurely with cancer at the age of 62. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it was very intense, and just to give you an idea of who she was back in her time in the 60s, sort of what Michael Phelps was to swimming in the United States. I mean, she held, I don't know, half a dozen records, in swimming in Venezuela. So, a very prominent, top athlete and so on, just dwindled and really hurt. By this entire situation. And it took us into a space of real soul searching and going very deep within. Mm-hmm.
Well, and Federico, I mean, most people, I think all of us have encountered some level of adversity, but to literally have everything that your family worked for a very long time, generations to build, taken away by a dictator, and suddenly having to figure out, how do we survive? How do we live? What do we do in this situation? And it took you on a heck of a journey of becoming an entrepreneur with many different twists and turns, from making boats in Maine to becoming a professor at Oxford in the United Kingdom in England, and finally finding this niche as an award-winning filmmaker. Tell us a little bit about, what was that journey like for you? Because for so many Groovesters that are they're with Groove, they're in our community because they're sick of whatever they had to face, their adversity. Obviously, very few of us will ever understand the depths of what your family had to go through, but still it made you stronger, and you emerged, where you are today as a very successful and accomplished individual. What was that like? How did you attack that feeling of, oh my gosh, I have nothing left?
Yeah, of course, I went through a lot of stages. Initially, very tough, very tough, really challenging, reducing our life. I mean, I was to the point, Ridgely, where I was living in my wife's uncle's house. He would pay for food and diapers while we got relocated and restructured our life. And it isn't like, oh my God, there's one time everything gets taken away. It's like, no, it happened multiple times. And what we were doing at the time is, I was, living in the Andes of Venezuela. My wife had inherited a house that had been 6 generations in the family, a beautiful home. I mean, we're talking about, about 10,000 feet up in altitude, right? Beautiful home. And then I said, it's like, you know what? Easy life. My wife, my newborn son at the time, Lothar was just, a few months old. And we decided to restore it and restructure it and turn it into a bed and breakfast. Now, all of this craziness just continues. And I tell my wife one day, after we asked the family for money, and we had borrowed money internally, etc. And so anyway, we finished it, and it started working. Okay, great. But then the situation continued to deteriorate in the country. And I said, honey, I'm going to have to go back, to my marketing days, working with Tom Feltenstein, actually the one who introduced us, who was like the eminent, marketer in the food service, and former executive from McDonald's. I mean, he knew a lot. And fortunately, I spent, 10 years really working hard with him. So I had a phenomenal base. And I said to her, it's like, honey, I can no longer continue to put my energy here. Let me go back with my contacts and reestablish, and reinvent myself. So having had that background in marketing, then this was back in the days when YouTube was getting started. And I said, one of the greatest things is going to be, video is going to be the future of this. And then applying the fundamentals of marketing, and then with video creation is like, wow, this can be really cool. And well, actually, I don't know if you remember this, Richard, way back when you first told me, it's like, hey, I don't have any marketing, projects going on, but can you process some videos for me? Do you remember that?
No.
That is so great. And I said, yes, of course. I knew nothing about how to do a video. So what I did is I went to the university town, and I found an award-winning documentary maker, and I said, hey, come on over. I had no money to pay him. I said, come on over, teach me how to do this thing, how to work this video editing program. And then, come up and stay with your girlfriend, in our inn, spend a week here, everything on us. And that was essentially the trade-off we did. And that was, the first videos that we actually produced.
Well, it's kind of amazing, Fede. Let's just jump in here for a second, because for all the people that are watching or listening to this is the quintessential entrepreneur journey. You come from a wealthy background, you have everything taken away by a dictator. You go, oh my gosh, what do I got to do? And you go through a series of micro careers as a biologist, as a boat maker, as a professor at a university, and then say, you know what, I'm just going to go back to my country and I'm going to make it there somehow as an entrepreneur. And then it gets worse in the country.
Exactly.
And you have to say, oh no, I'm going to go back. I have to come back to the land of opportunity, which is the United States of America, because at least here I can start over from nothing. And then you literally started from scratch based on a project that was handed to you that you just said, yeah, I need the project. I better say yes, because we need the money. And then I'll figure out how the heck I do this. And this launched an entire third or fourth career, which has now become a thing of which you are a complete master and expert, which is the whole world of filmmaking and video making, obviously super valuable on the internet and in online marketing. But I'm curious about is the internal game. Yeah. Talk to us a little bit, Fede, about what it was like inside. How did you keep getting up? I mean, you were smacked around pretty hard, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
what was that about? What was,
let me, I'm going to get very, very real here, because I think sometimes we sort of glance over it. And I think that's a disservice to the realities of what one goes through, or what I went through. I remember as I would drive up the mountainside, the only thing we were able to keep is sort of our family house, which is at the very, very top of the mountain, overlooking the entire valley of Caracas. Beautiful, beautiful place. However, every time I drove up, it was just such rage, Ridgely. It was anger, it was frustration. You know, mom died, we lost everything. I felt, you know, miserable and dirty, and I felt a lot of anger and frustration, rage, you know. And I said, hey, this cannot go on, because if it does, it's going to burn me up. And I've got children. I cannot afford to leave this world so like this, you know, out of the rage. So what I did is I started using that to fuel, that sort of became my fire to get things going again. And what I mean by that is that I would grab a punching bag, right? You know, at home, I just grab a punching bag, and I take myself to the extreme. And you know, when you get to that point when you're doing like 10 reps, etc., of something that all of a sudden you get to, it's like, oh, I cannot move my hand anymore. I cannot throw another punch. What I would do then is I would, in my mind, focus on these people from the government, and I'd put their faces in that bag, and you know, a fire would erupt inside of me, and a strength and a second wind would come to me, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, I was able to make that shift from the mental frustration into the body, and then get that out, and then I would come into spaces of peace. And then whether it was, you know, chanting or breathing or exercising, just moving that out of my system, all of a sudden came a clarity and a fire that I could then focus into whatever it is that I was doing. So I guess deliberately, I had to focus my energy into something, and I used that fire to drive that passion. And I did not allow the hatred or the frustration or the, you know, to overwhelm me, you know. And I imagine, you know, a lot of people are feeling this way nowadays, because we're going through some really challenging moments right now. And if there's anything that I can share with you that hopefully stays, is use it to your advantage, you know. And let me just be clear of what I mean. You know, we can be, it doesn't matter, you know, which end of the spectrum you're in terms of the political situation, etc. If we stay stuck in the social media aspect of things, all of that adrenaline, anger, frustration stays in the body. It's all mentally generated, but it stays in the body. And if we don't get it into motion, and we don't get it out of ourselves. And adrenaline is very poisonous. I mean, it's nasty stuff. You have to flush it out of the system. However, when you do flush it out of the system, then there's all kinds of other things that happen. Endorphins, oxygenation of your system, of your tissues, of your brain. And then all of a sudden you're starting to think at a different level. And it's like, oh my God, this is this is valuable.
Yeah, it's one of those things where people talk about this all the time and say, just move, get your body moving. Don't sit there and wallow in your stuff. Right. Go for a walk. One of the things that I learned, that I found fascinating, is that many of the world's philosophers are walkers. So I was asking myself, why do they like to hike? Why do they like to walk? And I did some research and found out that when you're in that methodical 1, 2, 3 step, and you continue to do that, it releases a space in your brain for creativity to come in while that monotonous pace is going on. And that's why so many philosophers love to think about life as they're walking. You're saying largely the same thing with a little bit different variation. Get the junk out of your system. Use your body to help you recover, get that mental clarity back, and then re-engage. Now, I got a question for you. This is quintessential entrepreneur question, and that is, we've been friends for a very long time, and I know your history and I know the background. It's amazingly diverse. I mean, from a biologist to a boat maker to a marketing dude to a professor at Oxford to finally finding your real true calling as a filmmaker. What's that like to have that kind of a richness? Is it like because you're just weird, or is it because something inside drove you to constantly be reinventing yourself? Because you've reinvented yourself professionally at least 6 or 7 times. Very true.
Very true. And it's part of my, I guess it's an inherent desire just to learn and to experience life. And whatever it is that I'm doing, I do it full on. Find the best people in that field, and then just go all out and hold nothing back. I mean, I remember way back when, how, late into the 2000s, they were doing the DNA gene mapping. Okay. Way back when, in my times as a biologist, I used to, and when this was first getting started, this whole DNA sequencing and everything, I was up in whale boats in the North Atlantic, chasing whales, taking tiny little samples of their skin so we could map their population, and we know who was that from who and what offspring came. We mapped 5,000 different right whales and finback whales. So it's that kind of like, I am just fascinated with life. I remember one of our first launches in that I did with videos was phenomenal because I had some very beautiful videos, in the Maya Riviera in Tulum that were just absolutely gorgeous. And what was used at the time was the flash video encoder, right? Now, understand this, this is like pre-YouTube days, okay? YouTube existed already, but that whole thing where you just throw up a video in there and then it renders it at 360 or 240 or whatever, that didn't exist. So I had to, here was my challenge. I had to work in an environment in South America, all over Latin America, Hispanic America at the time, horrible internet speeds. I would not compromise the look of the video in any way. So I spent 3 months figuring out different coding systems, the different ways that I could package the video so that with minimal bandwidth usage, the user would get the absolute beautiful experience of that. So that's just the kind of stuff that I do. And, I can give you a million more examples, but this is sort of relevant to the internet marketing world.
Yeah, well, and that's what makes you you, man. That's what makes you as good as you are. So talk to us a little bit about a couple entrepreneurial concepts. What do you think, if you look back on your career, what do you think are the 1 or 2 characteristics that are most important to becoming a successful entrepreneur?
I'm going to mention 2 very different ones. One is to have a deep interest and a fascination with whatever's in front of you, because that sort of drives that creative spirit, and so I think that's huge. And number two, there's got to be a burning fire within to just go through whatever crap we have to deal with. And entrepreneurs face an inordinate amount of crap. And if we are, and here's the thing that I've learned recently, Ridgely, if we are in love with the end result, it's never as fun as when we start really getting infatuated with the journey. And what I mean by that is that, somebody making $10,000, a year, it's like, oh, okay, they have very $10,000 level problems. You make 100,000, a million, 100 million. The problems don't go away. They get bigger. It's extra zeros, right? But there's something internally that we continue to grow. And it's like, bring it on, man. It's like, yeah, what else can I take on? What else are you going to throw at me? Let me just give you a quick example of a person that really encapsulates this. And many people don't like him because he's like absolutely nuts. Elon Musk is a great example. Here's a guy who's crazy enough to think that in his lifetime, he can put a rocket in Mars and actually go there. Okay. That's how crazy he is. Okay, he's driven into that. And what does he do? He buys Twitter. I mean, he just bought a $44 billion problem. Can you imagine what his morning brief looks like? It's like, oh, you just got sued by by this one. You got sued by that one. You've got fires to put out everywhere. But he is just so in love with that whole aspect of his own vision that he will take it on, and he just keeps going on making jokes, and like him or not, that really explains the heart of the entrepreneur, in my mind.
Yeah, and I think whether you look at Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich or any of the other great works put out on characteristics of the entrepreneur, without question, the one that is at the absolute top of the list of every interview that's ever been done on a consistent basis is you've got to be willing to pay the price and persevere. And both those two go together. It's pay the price for as long as it takes. As my mentor, Jim Rohn, used to say, how long should you keep trying? Until.
Yes.
Until you get it done, until you make it, until you figure it out, until whatever that looks like. And I think that that's such I know we talk about it a lot, but we can't hear it enough times.
Yeah.
That fire, that burning desire, that thing is what makes an entrepreneur successful. Because as you said, Fede, if you're an entrepreneur, you just have an underdeveloped sense of fear.
Yes.
And you have a really bad memory, because you don't remember how hard it was the last time you tried to do one of these things, I think. And we try to learn, but we're like, oh man, I got this. I got a new idea and we're going to go for this one and whatever. Eventually, I think that most serious entrepreneurs with a little bit of experience under their belts end up landing in a space that is very fulfilling, like yourself with filmmaking, like myself with communication and persuasion. I love those fields. I love my field. I know you love your field. So let's go the other way. What would you say? Pick one, just one. I know there've been many, but pick one business setback, if you will, and one lesson that you learned from that setback that you could share with all of the groovesters and groove stars around the world that for sure have had their own set of setbacks, but everybody's looking to learn. What would you say that would be?
Wow, so many to pick from. Yeah, that abounds. I would say one of the biggest ones in my mind was that time that we were restoring La Casona. I mean, I had moved back. Everything was completely gone. And I think because that really was sort of rock bottom. Mm-hmm. Never had I been in that position of such loss and embarrassment that I would live in somebody else's house and they would put food on the table and buy the diapers for my kids. And that was nothing. However, what was wonderful about that time, I mean, that was just a horrible setback. And I mean, it was so bad that I would be pre-selling nights, you know, in our bed and breakfast. And I would take that money, it's like, here, buy cement, buy paint, buy whatever it is that we need to do, because we've got to finish this by the time they get here. I mean, it was that level of intensity, of fire, of borderline craziness, you know? And I actually loved that space a lot.
You got to say more about that, man, because most people listening are like, what? What do you mean? That sounds horrible.
Yeah. I mean, it's that sense of, as I was saying before, can we channel rage? Can we channel that level of intensity into something creative and beautiful and something that we really believe in and hold dear to our hearts? Okay. And, you know, fast forward to now, in terms of why do I do this, right? And you know, I mean, I'm very picky of the people I work with, because I've got to, there's a deeper sense of mission that sort of drives this entire thing. And I think without it, you know, and Tony Robbins talks about this a lot, that you can get to success, but if there's no fulfillment, you're just as empty as when you were broke. And to me, there's a deep sense of fulfillment and belief in the people that I work with, because they are good causes that make a difference. And there's alignment in supporting that entrepreneurial spirit. And to me, being a Venezuelan who lost his country and having, this is actually something that most people don't know, but the independence of South America, the independence of Venezuela, was modeled after the independence in the US. So the George Washingtons and Jeffersons, you know, everybody who was involved in the Declaration of Independence, actually, we had our leaders who wanted our own independence come here back and forth. As a matter of fact, one of our generals came and fought in the Pensacola Wars, you know, right where you live. And so we essentially modeled our system based on this new discovery of what these Americans were doing up north, because it was really phenomenal. So having that history and loving the creation of a space where entrepreneurship can flourish, that to me is the greatest blessing that this country offers, and that mindset. And that's what has to like live through. And that, I believe, you know, I'm very optimistic, even though the challenges I see are absolutely horrible, you know, in this moment. That's what I believe is going to propel and get us through whatever craziness we're living through right now. So to go back, it's a mission. I mean, you've got to put your heart in it. Bottom line.
That's exactly right, man. I think that no matter how dark, one of the things that we know that Jim Rohn talks about is that winter always turns into spring. Yes. There has never been a winter that turned back into autumn. It turns into spring, and there is a dawn after dark every day. It may not be a huge dawn, but it's a dawn. You know, and I think that we as entrepreneurs have to constantly kindle that internal sense of, hey man, things might look dark right now, but if I can muster the ability to get back up and start fighting again, there is a way out. And oh, by the way, online is a much better way of doing that than in the brick and mortar space, where the investment, the difficulty is so much harder. Online, you can start a business for almost nothing. You can use a machine like the Groove machine to have your voice heard, to get your message out there, to share whatever your expertise may be in a way that actually generates revenue and serves a lot of people. It's really a pretty insane kind of a situation that we're living in. But we can't forget about it. So what do you do when you're talking to a friend and they're on their entrepreneurial journey, and for whatever reason they're down in that moment, what do you say to them? What do you say to them to remind them to rekindle the fire, to remind them to get back up again, to remind them to go learn a little bit more, get online, watch some videos, listen to somebody? What do you tell them?
Yeah, mostly I ask a question. What's the deeper purpose behind what you're doing? Because usually when that happens, and I've been there multiple times, multiple times, but when I can come back to what is it that I am doing, not in terms of me offering the service and video creation, blah, 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 blah. No. What is it that that thing is doing for the people who you're benefiting? And start thinking about them and the difference that you're making in their lives. Okay? Because then that completely shifts the focus from, oh, me, poor me. Can I make ends meet? Can I do this? Can I solve this problem, etc., to something much bigger in terms of reconnecting with a cause that's deeper than the superficial thing of the transaction. Mm-hmm. And that's essentially where I take, my friends or myself, when those moments do happen, and they do happen, and they happen a lot. A lot of people think that, that journey to entrepreneurship is like, oh, okay, I'm struggling, then I do the launch, and then it's like, oh, then it's, then we start making money, and it's like, oh, happy ever after. It's no. More like a spiral.
Yeah.
And
sure.
And when we go through those challenging periods, it's like, hey, what's the service? What's the benefit? How is it that what I do, whether it's a cooking course or a course on sleeping, on exercise, etc. It's like, okay, how am I making the life better of the people I am influencing? And yes, you're absolutely right. This digital space really allows us to connect intentionally with people and create tribes and communities. And, Groove is a perfect example of it, right? Entrepreneurs, they want to make a difference. And it's like, okay, this is really cool. And get on there, and do listen to podcasts and do listen to conversations and get involved in the masterminds and get involved in action. But again, take action. Because otherwise, it's just mental activity. The same way I described before, what happens in the body when we release all this adrenaline and just stays there because we don't move and we don't exercise and we just don't use our bodies. The same way, if we're just listening there, sort of taking it in, I call it mental masturbation. It's like, no. Back into action, because then you start driving that wheel of purpose.
Yeah, I love that. So I know, one of the things that's great about this age that we live in is that information and opportunities, possibilities for learning are everywhere. So if you were to be speaking to an entrepreneur and they said to you, or a budding entrepreneur, all right, Federico, you've been around a long time. You've been through lots of ups and downs and you're successful. What 3 books would you recommend? 3 books, and I don't care if you listen to the books on tape or you read the books or you read them in a Kindle, but what 3 teachings would you recommend from experts to an up-and-coming entrepreneur?
Wonderful question. Number 1, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Mm-hmm. This is not a book, this is a Bible. Yeah. For human interconnectedness. And if you're not reading that, once or twice a year, you're missing out on a lot. Mm-hmm. Because it just goes to the reality of connecting between human beings. Yeah.
I love grabbing that and just looking at little pieces of this right over there on my shelf. I have it ready and handy to grab that. I love that. For sure. Yeah. All right.
Then there is a book of a deep friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine, who shares his story. I mean, you just heard my story. What this man lived through, what this boy lived through, is a million times worse. And this is my friend Ridgely Goldsborough, the great ones.
Well,
And
thank
the
you.
reason I love this book, and I'll share a story about it right now, but the reason that I love this book, Ridgely, is because you take people through the journey of your very, very, very challenging childhood, also in a golden cage, where money was used as in the worst possible ways to manipulate and very challenging moments. I don't want to give, the gist of the book away, but, very challenging moments with abuse from your stepdad. I mean, just, forget everything I've said. This is a million times worse. But Ridge, you took that and you took that intensity, what I call that rage, that intensity, that fire, and you turned it into 40 different businesses that you created over your life, right? You said, forget all of this. I'm heading out and I'm making my own name and I'm doing my own thing. And this is the fire that drove you there. And this is the journey. That's why it's so beautiful. And actually, I'll tell a story. My Lothar is now 13 and we've been reading this book together. And it's like, Lothar, what's that fire that you can ignite? And last year, he's a very athletic young boy. Now he's taller than I am, even though he's just 13. And, he swims and he plays soccer. I mean, that's what he loves. But last year he was really, with this whole thing of the toxic masculinity and all this crazy stuff going on. I mean, Lothar was bullied, you're bullying, a 5'9", 13-year-old kid, athletic kid. He hurt a lot. And I said, son, take that intensity into your swimming. Take that intensity into the way you run. Take that intensity into the way you move, like we've been talking, into the way you study. And just a couple days ago, I don't know, something just like clicked for him. And all of a sudden, from being, he's now at the top of his swimming group in the, in the club, etc. And this is a very competitive club. I mean, we've got, people who are, quadruple A level swimmers. I mean, this is pre-Olympic swimmer levels. Okay. And this kid is just taking this fire and putting it into action into his own world. And there's been a real transformation.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. But give us number 3.
Number 3 is The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer.
Tell me about that.
This is the story of a yogi who sets out on a journey to find God. And through his own experience and that same level of intensity, goes through some major openings spiritually in terms of discovering purpose, discovering, something, a connection to something much bigger than ourselves. And then he takes that and focuses into programming, computer programming. This is back in the 70s, okay? Ends up creating WebMD, takes the company public, sells it multiple times, multi-billion-dollar company, there's a scandal that goes on and some internal weirdness going on, FBI raid, helicopters, whatever. He's going to go to jail for the rest of his life, did absolutely nothing wrong. But, everything, heaven and earth sort of descend on him, talk about taking everything away. Woof! To such a level. And then it's his journey as to how he used this process to deepen and to expand his connection to, something that's greater than ourselves. So absolutely phenomenal book. Really, really amazing. So if somebody's looking for like deeper meaning and deeper engagement and how to turn that into some, real revenue, and growth, and stay sane with it and actually learn to enjoy it, phenomenal.
Love that. All right, Federico, thank you so much for everything you've shared with us. As we're wrapping up today, final words to the budding entrepreneur. What would you like to leave us with? You're talking to entrepreneurs that we're all trying to get our voice out there, trying to contribute and make a difference in this world. What would be your final thoughts to share?
Be willing to face the fire and to channel it and to use it, and be so deliberate in your intent of doing it. And when there is a tendency to fall victim to it, because at times it can be so hard that it can overwhelm us, find that space inside through movement to re-engage that and never lose sight of your heart. Let that be your guiding light. And that, I think, makes for a very beautiful life.
Thank you very much, Federico Giller. I really appreciate the time we spent in the Groove community with all the Groovers and Groove stars. Again, award-winning filmmaker who has made an incredible impact in the online world, but more in the world in general, overcoming ridiculous odds from way back when. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your wisdom, Fede. Deeply appreciate you and can't wait to connect with you again.
Look forward to it. Take care. It's been a pleasure being here.